Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Buckets. If you're over on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and drop a like. It helps the video do better in the algorithm, so it's much appreciated. And if you want to enjoy this as an audio-only experience, go ahead and check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Two quick things for house cleaning at the start here. First of all, if there's any story that we don't end up covering during these news videos and you would like us to react to them, well, you can comment below and we might get to it that way. But if you want a guaranteed way, a guaranteed line of communication, if you go ahead and follow us over on Patreon, there is a link to our Discord server, and we have a lot of fun, interesting conversations over there, so that will be linked. Also, for the people who are a fan of the My League stuff, started off on the wrong foot with this year's cycle, but I am just recording an entire series in one go before I release anything because I'm so tired of falling short for y'all's expectations. I deleted the Lakers one because I just took too long to get back to it. My point is, there will be a My League series again, but wait, we'll see. I don't want to give too many promises here. With that said, let's go ahead and get into some NBA news. It's actually been a while since we've done some news stories because there either hasn't been much to do or other stuff has come up. I think I was out of town for one of the weeks. So we got to talk about a good amount of stories here, which there hasn't been a lot. Some of them it's been a little bit of a stretch to do these, but this time around we got quite a bit. Unfortunately, Dikembe Mutombo passed away a couple of days ago at what age was he? 58? I believe he had brain cancer, and I know there was stuff coming out reporting that this was an ongoing situation. But yeah, Dikembe Mutombo is one of the greatest players one of the greatest defensive players who has ever played this game. I believe multiple Defensive Player of the Year awards, top 3 all-time in all-time blocks, very good rebounder, and like a solid enough offensive player. This is going to sound rude to some people because for some reason people just fucking hate on Rudy Gobert to a comical extent, but in many ways he was kind of the Rudy Gobert of his era, the just ridiculously talented paint protector who had some offensive limitations, but his impact was undeniable. And of course, he had the iconic finger wag, the no. I was showing some of these highlights to my some of his highlights to my girlfriend the other day. I didn't realize the extent in which he wagged the finger. There was one play, I think it was the second best play of his career, where he blocked 4 shots on the same possession, and after every single one, he wagged his finger. That is fucking dope, and it is adding an entertainment aspect to defense that not a lot of players can bring. There's not a lot of flair on the defensive end of the floor. Dikembe definitely brought the flair. So RIP to an NBA legend, Dikembe Mutombo. Next up, we got Anthony Edwards talking about Rajon Rondo and Chris Paul, or rather, this is going to be more of a broader conversation.
Yeah, prime CP3 or prime Rondo?
I gotta go with Rondo.
Rondo? That'll be a good matchup, though. All right, next up we got prime.
He just said, I gotta go Rondo. He didn't give some big explanation to why he feels this way. However, I think this is a ridiculous take, and it's more indicative of a type of take that I've been seeing recently, specifically in the hot takes videos. I recently did a hot take video where the title and thumbnail was about Chris Paul and Chris Paul being the 3rd best point guard ever, which I don't think is like some shoo-in, some lock. But the way that people acted as though my saying that was blasphemy has kind of brought me to the conclusion that Chris Paul might just be the most underrated player in the history of this game, and similar to Rudy Gobert, who I mentioned earlier, a lot of it just derives from people simply not liking the guy. Now, I'm not necessarily the biggest Chris Paul fan. I am a massive fan of anybody who's a really good mid-range shooter, and he's one of the probably 5, bare minimum 10 greatest mid-range shooters who's ever played this game. Chris is just better at everything than Rondo. Maybe rebounding. I mean, I can pull up some of their career numbers real quick. Obviously, basketball is not just numbers. I will get to the actual skill set stuff. Points per game. Chris Paul leads by 7 points. Rebounds per game, Rondo leads by 0.4. Assists per game, Rondo leads by 0.5. Steals goes to Chris at 2.4. Field goal percentage is slightly better for Rondo, but bear that in mind that he is a non-shooter. So he's pretty much only taking shots around the basket for the most part. You look at the three-point percentage, night and day difference. We're talking about 23% from three versus 37, 61% from the free throw line versus 87. Then if we just go, pure counting stats, like 7-point difference, essentially the same assists, rebounds, and steals, but the efficiency is just such a stark contrast. Where's our true shooting? A fucking 7% difference. Do you see that shit? 7.3% difference in true shooting percentage. Do you know how fucking massive that is? It's a joke. The suggestion that these guys are on the same level is a joke. Let's look at, per 100 possessions. 11 more points. Again, essentially the same assists, slightly more steals towards Chris. Offensive rating versus defensive rating there. Look at that shit. 106 versus 124. Part of that is that Chris has some further years in history and Rondo's earlier on, so that probably makes that difference look larger than it actually is. But one way or the other, Rondo just isn't as good as Chris Paul. Mid-range shooting, free throw shooting, three-point shooting, probably efficiency at the rim if I had to guess, especially in the peak years, because Chris Paul was a pretty good slasher in his earlier years. Now he never goes to the basket to like a hilarious degree. I think he took like 20 shots in the restricted area last season, and they were probably all on the fucking fast break. But we go back to those peak seasons, 2008 through 2015. Takes roughly, I don't know, I'd say like 17% of his shots at the basket. Shoots in the 60s, up to the 70s in 2014. That's pretty good for a guard. Now, in the case of Rondo, far more of his field goals are at the rim, 44%, but that's because he couldn't fucking hit any other shot. And he shot 62% at the rim. So, yeah, I would argue Chris, similar level of finisher, similar level of playmaker. Honestly, I think Chris gets a substantial edge in the playmaking department because, A, you got to consider that in Rondo's peak years, he had some of the best assist targets in the league. Obviously, Chris had that in his Clippers tenure, but he was still putting up crazy assist numbers in his New Orleans Hornets tenure. So he was able to get more assists with worse players. But on top of that, scoring gravity is a huge thing. And I think Chris Paul, if you categorize him as a true point guard, which I kind of go back and forth on that categorization because of his scoring volume being pretty high, I think his threat to score for his peak seasons has always been high enough that the defense respects him to a degree that opens up opportunities for his teammates, because his three ball out of the pick and roll, especially his mid-range shot out of the pick and roll, is such a significant threat that opens up opportunities for passes to, in New Orleans, David West or Tyson Chandler, and in LA, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan. You get the picture. So Chris Paul, so much better. There is a great video by Hoop Venue that he just put out recently about Chris Paul's game, specifically in more detail than I'm giving it to you right now, with actual clips corresponding with it. So I would recommend you check out that video to understand the true depths of how fucking talented Chris Paul was. And before you give me that playoff dropper bullshit, basically there's one or two games, maybe three, in his entire playoff career where it's like his fault that they lost like a key game in the series. Otherwise, it was his teammates getting hurt, himself getting hurt, or other unforeseen circumstances. Chris Paul has just had bad luck throughout his entire career, and people are using that as a reason to just completely discount the reality of the talent that he was. And like, I understand that not having a title hurts your legacy. I'm okay with that being a factor in this all. However, when we use it to deny talent, because, well, if he was that talented, he would have won a championship, that is such a caveman, basic-ass take that takes no context into the equation. What year in Chris Paul's career did he really have a legitimate shot at winning a championship as the best player undeniably on that team. You could argue, I don't think he was undeniably the best player on the 2021 Phoenix Suns. In the case of the Hornets, those rosters were never good enough. And in the case of the Clippers, again, routinely Blake Griffin or himself would get injured in those postseason runs, and they only had a couple of years to even do that. So, Chris Paul, I might end up making a video about him in general on a larger scale about just how underrated he is, but based on the discourse I've been seeing in the NBA world at large, but especially in my hot takes comments, I just don't fucking get it. To me, it doesn't make any sense. This is the most well-rounded 6-foot player who has ever played the game, and it's not even close. Not even close. We're moving on, though. A couple of players have added on some weight, and some have lost it. Victor Wembanyama gained 25 pounds from last season, now listed at 235 pounds. That should help him rather significantly. I'm glad that the report doesn't suggest that it's 25 pounds of muscle, because that happens like every offseason, and it's hilarious because it's borderline humanly impossible. You have to take so much HGH and shit that it's like ridiculous to even consider the prospect of that. However, added weight, even if it's just quote unquote fat or whatever, that's still good. There's such thing as fat man strength. Believe me, I would know. I've had it many times in my life, arguably have it now, depending on if I'm categorized as that now. However, that should be good. It should be a nice addition for Victor. I don't think it's anything to freak out about, but it's nice to see. Especially that he was able to gain so much in such a short amount of time at that. That's especially difficult for dudes who have the very wiry frame that he does. It should also be good for injury prevention, but injury prevention in terms of weight distribution goes both ways, because Joel Embiid has lost 25 pounds in the offseason, and he's committing to increasing the odds of his health in the playoffs. I think for me, and Daryl will tell you this, as soon as we lost last year, I just texted him, we have to do whatever it takes to make sure I get a full season in health. This year, there's no agenda. There's no All-Star. There's no All-NBA. There's none of that. It's whatever it takes to make sure I get to that point where I'm ready to go. That's a positive thing. I do think the less weight should overall help him with his injury stuff. I hope the less weight doesn't get him to start like jumping more. I think he should still stay grounded even with weighing a little bit less, because that's another area where injury risk comes into the equation. But I've always felt like Embiid was just a little heavier than he needed to be. Not to a degree that you could really criticize the guy for it, but also he was also at a degree where a big problem for getting injured for like a stretch of time is that the player then gets out of shape, which out of shape over a 3-month period for a normal human being, you're not really going to lose enough that's that significantly noticeable unless you're really just doing a horrible job with your diet management. But in the case of an NBA player, you get out of NBA shape very quickly, and most players have to play themselves into it. Most don't enter the season that way, and if you're entering a playoff series on the back foot, you're entering a playoff series like on the cusp of injury, that is going to continually have significant negative consequences. So I'm very glad this has been addressed, and it should hopefully reap better benefits for Philadelphia. I'm kind of coming around on Embiid just based on a lot of the shit that I have seen in the discourse around him. I used to be one of the biggest Embiid haters on YouTube, but the way that people just feel so confident outright dismissing him as a whole, I think is silly, and I think it is ignoring a lot of context about how injuries have affected his career and his postseason success. Ironically, similarly to Chris Paul, however, unlike Chris Paul, Embiid has undeniably had playoff droppage that had nothing to do with health. Cameron Payne was also accidentally listed at 289 pounds. So it looks like the Knicks have really figured out their center rotation. All right, for some quick moves here and some injury stuff, Jose Alvarado has agreed to a 2-year, $9 million extension for the Pelicans. That seems like a right amount of value to me. Jose is a cool backup, but definitely not in the we should pay this guy a lot of money to come off of our bench territory. Trey Murphy III is out for at least 3 weeks with a hamstring strain, which is unfortunate. The Pelicans tend to start the season strong and then lose it, so not having him maybe it'll help them that they don't go so hard out of the gate and burn through all of their energy, but I don't know, that might just be dumb. This is a big story Lonzo Ball, injury update going into this season, says, I feel good. Archuis Connors Graviceris, or however the fuck you say the Bulls GM name. I am not going to give him the respect of pronouncing it correctly because he sucks and I hate him. He did say that Lonzo should be good to start the season. That's fucking massive. He has not played since January of 2022. January of 2020. That's a long fucking time ago. That's a very long stretch. The editor of this channel and host of the fantastic podcast, The Coping Hour, Nick, said in the recent episode about Lonzo that anybody who really makes any prediction other than who fucking knows is pulling it out of their ass. Like, they're bullshitting. Like, there is no indicator really of what the fuck's going to happen. Odds lean towards he probably won't be good and he'll probably be out of the league in a couple of years. Like, missing that amount of time with injuries that significant is very hard to recover from. That said, it's happened, at least in terms of maintaining your place in the league. Klay Thompson's the most clear example from recent history. So it's possible. And what I'm interested in is exactly what his role looks like for the Chicago Bulls, because the Bulls have a lot of guards. Like, a lot of guards. Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White, Josh Giddey. I believe they just signed Josh Primo. I don't know if they then immediately released him after that, but he's on the fucking team because apparently the Bulls just want to add a sex offender registry to the roster. Zach LaVine also plays guard, and he'll probably get a good amount of minutes. So, a lot of guard rotation minutes, not a lot of guys you can play at the 3 out of those options. A lot of them you can play at the 2, so there will be some ability to do some overlap, but I'm not really sure what his minutes look like, and I also don't think the future on his team is much of anything. Most likely, if I just had to make a prediction very loosely, it probably looks okay, and they trade him for, like, some second-round picks, maybe a protected first or, like, a shitty first-round pick, and they get back some contract who's a non-player, and it's, like, some good playoff team / contender level team taking a swing on hoping that Lonzo can be healthy for them, because Lonzo is a very, very high-value role player, starting caliber player when he's healthy. Unfortunately, when he's healthy is something we're talking about the past in that instance. But I didn't even think he was going to be ready to start this season, so that is a positive development. Trailblazers, Shaedon Sharpe out for 4 to 6 weeks with the shoulder injury. That really does suck because Shaedon is one of my favorite young players in the NBA. He reminds me of J.R. Smith in a lot of ways, the super athletic shooting guard with a very smooth-looking jump shot. Rajon Rondo joins the Bucks as a guest coach? Not an assistant coach? The fuck's a guest coach? I guess it's anyone's guest. The T. Steve Kerr disagrees with Jonathan Kuminga on what position he is. I'm not playing around and keeping anything from you guys, Kerr told the media. I'm legitimately trying to figure out what my starting 5 is. At the end of the day, I know I'm a small forward, Kuminga said. I can do it, I can play it at the highest level, but going forward, it's all about what the team wants me to do. It doesn't matter, small forward or whatever. Kuminga's potential extension is 2 weeks away, so there's a lot riding on this shit before the season even starts. I don't fucking know what the Warriors are going to do with their starting forward situation, because the unfortunate reality is if you're starting a 5 who's either Looney or Trace Jackson Davis, whichever one you pick, then you're starting Draymond at the 4, who technically shot 40% from 3 last season, but it was on 2 attempts per game, which means it was entirely wide open 3s and the defense doesn't respect them. So your spacing is still going to be shit, even if he technically hits 0.8 threes a game. Kuminga really isn't a 3-point shooting guy either. He has improved as his career has gone along, but he hasn't gone anywhere near the territory of being a good 3-point shooter. So if you start him at small forward, Curry and Pods are the only good 3-point shooters on the team. Now, I recognize that Curry is a talented enough 3-point shooter that he does mitigate overall poorer spacing, but also spacing begets spacing, and the better you make the spacing around Steph, the more effective and dangerous his spacing ability ends up being, rather than it just being supplementary to otherwise a terrible shooting team. So for that reason, I don't know what the Warriors do here. The My League series that I'm starting is actually about the Warriors, and I didn't really know what to do here because that lineup I just don't think works. Now, you can get away with Kuminga at the 4 and Draymond at the 5, or Kuminga at the 4 and Jackson Davis or Looney at the 5. That works, but in terms of your closing lineup, you go with the veteran presence, the defensive presence, the history, the chemistry with Steph, or do you go with the younger player who has much more of a scoring prowess when scoring is the number one concern with this roster? That's a very interesting thing to watch out for. The perfect world is that Kuminga has just grinded with his jump shot this offseason and that he's going to be a knockdown shooter, but I would be pretty shocked if that happened. I'm pretty sure the Warriors have started Draymond at center for a full season and then just made that. No, they haven't. So he's still listed at power forward every year. I know he had a season where he played like a lot of the center position, but you can't really start him there. Not full time anyways. So yeah, that's an ongoing situation to watch out for. PJ Tucker is going to remain away from the Clippers on a mutually agreed separation. They don't want to pay him by buying him out, so they're going to try and trade him. I don't know how that's going to work because who wants him? Really? I just don't know that he's just fucking old, like really, really, really old. And he was one of those players who was a pretty good role player despite being super old. But I think we've reached the threshold where he's just bad because he's fucking old. Kawhi Leonard says Clippers' newest additions haven't, quote, stood out after Paul George's exit.
Who has kind of stood out for you during this week of training camp practices?
I mean, just the new guys, just watching them, the new additions we have from, Chris Dunn to Derrick Jones Jr., to some of the young guys that we brought in, and with Kai Jones last year, and just seeing, how they could develop. So just watching them from day 1 to day 2 to day 3, just seeing their progression. But nobody stood out to me so far.
Okay, first things first. Kawhi, dial it back. This energy, overwhelming. It's too much. I don't like it. You're trying too hard. Second of all, I don't really think this is that big of a deal. They signed a bunch of players who are not that great. Like Derrick Jones and Chris Dunn are some cool additions. Are they going to stand out by comparison to Paul George? Absolutely not. And also Kawhi Leonard is really weird and says really weird things all the time, but says it in such a monotone degree that he's like outwardly perceived as this super professional guy. But this is probably something you shouldn't say. You should probably lie to some degree. But, whatever. The Clippers are just a ship waiting to sink anyways. It's funny that they have changed their logo to a ship that's about to sink, but that doesn't surprise me at all. Some quick rumors. The Knicks are interested in Marcus Smart. Smart was likely not unhappy in Memphis, as many speculated over the summer. He was merely away from the team because he was having a child. There was some stuff that came up in terms of the media day about him. I don't remember what the exact details of that were. The Knicks being interested in him, I don't really know that they would be able to offer something that the Grizzlies are that interested in, especially given the fact that they traded Tyus Jones and 2 first-round picks to acquire him. So they're probably going to actually, at the bare minimum, see what Marcus Smart looks like on this team when everybody is healthy. Of course, last year, I wouldn't blame Marcus for not being happy under those circumstances, because he has been on a perpetual Eastern Conference Finals contender Boston Celtics for his entire career, and then last year he was on one of the worst teams in the NBA, so naturally, not a fun environment, but I think he can be right back into the swing of things and fit right in Memphis as soon as they are good again, which there's no reason to believe they won't be pretty much right out of the gate. Jimmy Butler trade rumors. Heat Star says that he wants to be in Miami and is eyeing a new contract. He also didn't fuck around on media day, which I think is overall good. While we have enjoyed the bit, we've kind of got some mixed messaging about the seriousness of Jimmy in multiple different contexts, so I think this is overall positive. There have been some trade rumors with him. I don't think the Heat want to pay him a max extension at 34, 35 years old, so it's going to be something to watch out for as well. Darius Garland denies trade rumors. I don't know how much of that he's really privy to, that he can deny it, but whatever. Zach LaVine trade to be actively explored by the Bulls. Amid Starr's remarks, what were his remarks? Yeah, I'm sure they're going to keep trying to actively trade him, and I'm sure other teams in the league are going to say, ha, sure, buddy, we'll trade for a $50 million a year player who's not even top 40 in the league. That makes a lot of sense. Lakers' Bronny James reflects on historic game with LeBron. Quote, that's literally my dad. I'm always thinking about that's my dad because that's literally my dad, James said after the game, per ESPN's Ramona Shelburne. So I just go out there, and while I'm playing, he's just my teammate. That's all I'm thinking at that point. Me and my dad have always played against each other my entire, growing up period, and now, we don't really have enough people to play against, so it's always just a one-on-one between us. So the few times that we have actually been teammates in a basketball setting has been very weird. Definitely just as weird as this is for LeBron and LeBron James Jr. Same situation. My opinion on the Bronny thing, there's a lot of discourse about it. I think it's fine. I think it's interesting. I think it's enjoyable. Will Bronny be a good NBA player? Who knows? I think he's a good defensive player, already, and being that positive on one side of the floor this early is a very good sign for a second-round pick. But the offense is rough, and I don't know if it'll ever not be. But there's a lot of people making a fuss. I don't think this is something to be that upset about, and I think a lot of the reason people are is because they are perpetually, professionally upset with anything that LeBron does. Bleacher Report did an MVP leaderboard with Luka at 1, Jokic at 2, SGA at 3, Brunson at 4, Giannis at 5, Tatum at 6, Ant at 7, Wemby at 8, 9 with Joel Embiid. Jeez. And Ja Morant at number 10, and of course, naturally, the person who was ranked number 10 is the player that Rudy chose to put the photo for. I believe I picked Luka to win MVP this year. I don't think Jokic is going to get a 4th. I don't think that's happening this year, and I think I said SGA if it wasn't Luka, so overall, I feel pretty good about this ranking. Actually, I would have put Giannis over Brunson in this ranking before the Cat trade. I'm that much more confident in the Knicks being really good, and specifically being really good in the regular season now, that I actually do think he'll probably end up higher on the MVP ladder. A part of that is that Giannis has he's reached this point, and this has happened with players before, but I think the effects of it have been more extreme with him than anybody else, where people are just so used to the way that he dominates that they just treat it like it's normal. It's not normal at all. And I feel like he has fallen short in MVP discussions a couple of times in the most recent years for no particularly good reason. I don't remember if it was 21 or 22, but one of those 2 years that Jokic won MVP, I strongly felt, and still do for the most part feel, that MVP should have gone to Giannis. All right, that is it for your NBA news. Be sure to stay tuned for these every week as the NBA season is right around the corner. We're about 2 weeks away from it. The preseason's already started. I could not be more fucking excited. The last couple of years, I have not exactly optimized my approach to doing content on either of my channels, but we are doing that this time around. You've probably noticed that there has been a larger frequency of uploads going into this season, and that's because we are ramping up to give you essentially at least near daily NBA content throughout the entirety of this season. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are too, and if you're new here and you still made it to this point, and you want to see that coverage going forward, subscribing or checking us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts is a great way to do that. One more quick reminder, go ahead and check us out over on Patreon. That link will be in the description to join the Discord to give stories that you want to see me talk about, and just to have discourse with me and other like-minded people, other subscribers to this channel. But yeah, that's it. Shout out to Nick for editing this video, and goodbye.